How's it going, everybody? If you are watching this, maybe Thanksgiving is going on right now, or maybe it just happens. It depends on when I post this video, right, Leonard?
Exactly, which I'm going to guess is going to be after now, but who knows what fickled finger of fate. I was going for it's an old thing from Laughing. Never mind, keep going.
That's all right. But since it is around the Thanksgiving holiday, we decided that we would talk about Survivor Series, specifically two that we wanted to highlight that are among our favorites since the event started. And before we get to that, we can talk briefly about how the most recent Survivor Series just happened. And it was, about a week or so after the AEW Full Gear event, which I have to say, from top to bottom, AEW Full Gear was one of the best shows I've ever seen. There's really not a lot of down in that event to me. But then Survivor Series happened. And if I'm being honest, I have not checked in to a lot of WWE content lately. I keep up to date with what's going on, but it really doesn't demand my full attention. And that is a big problem. Like, I didn't need to really tune in to anything that was going on to watch the Survivor Series and understand, because it was basically just brand versus brand. There's not really a ton of tension or storyline. They try here and there, with Big E and Roman Reigns, but there wasn't really a lot to be invested in my opinion. But the event itself, I thought, did not come off well. There were a couple good matches. I thought the tag team match, RK Bro and the Usos, I thought that was really good. Actually, both teams really had a lot of chemistry. The crowd seemed to be hot for that one. Roman Reigns and Big E put in good work, but there was never any doubt in anybody's mind what was going to happen there. And, so the obvious outcome is what occurred. And that's what I mean partly by, no tension, no suspense. There's very little stakes. And I think that's changed a lot since the Survivor Series began. What the Survivor Series is now is like a shell of its former self, in my opinion. We'll talk more about that as we get into the ones we chose. But one of the things that happened during this most recent Survivor Series is Vince McMahon made an appearance, and he brought with him one of Cleopatra's eggs from the movie Red Notice, which is on Netflix. And during the event, you saw more than a half dozen clips of The Rock and the fact that it was the 25th anniversary since he debuted at the Survivor Series. And what became quite obvious to me, and I feel sorry for the fans that maybe bought this hook, line, and sinker, was that The Rock was not going to be there. And there was this stupid storyline where the egg was stolen. Vince claimed it was real. It was worth $100 million. And that storyline was going to continue into Raw. And this, to me, was a really pathetic attempt to make fans believe that The Rock was going to show up. They wanted to build it as if he was going to be there, and he's not there. He's in Australia filming a movie. So whether or not the match between he and Roman Reigns happens this year or WrestleMania 39, who the hell knows? Who cares? I think that WWE is really, really making some bad moves in a time when their competition is slowly climbing upwards, in my opinion. So I just had to throw that out there, because the egg thing with Vince, like, I as soon as I saw that, and I noted all the clips of the past Rock accomplishments, I was like, he's not there, and he's not going to be there. Leonard, did you hear about this egg storyline? I know that you didn't.
I did. As we talked about, I haven't been watching the current project because it just doesn't engage me. Although the more I hear about AEW, the more I want to give them another try. The more I hear about WWE, the more I'm like, yeah, I'm probably good on that. But I did, read the results and listen to some things online and watch some things. And yes, I heard about the Cleopatra egg, and I knew that was tied into the Red Notice movie. And it just reminded me of the last time that an egg was a major part of Survivor Series, which we're going to talk about.
We will. Wow, that's funny. I did not even think about that as a connection. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, but first we're going to talk about the very first Survivor Series ever, which I don't know if I would call it my favorite, but it's one I watched on the network. Again, I know we're playing Peacock, the WWE section of Peacock, as it were, and I think we complained about it enough. But I don't know if I've ever mentioned. It drives me nuts with the pay-per-views that so Survivor Series, the first one is season 1, episode 1.
It's stupid. I hate it so much.
88 is like season 2, episode 1. It doesn't make any sense. And they don't have them in order either, like in the little strip, because you have to look, because I was just looking through, Survivor Series. Oh, that's the first one. And I don't know if I had ever seen the first one in its entirety.
Right.
So I said, hey, let's sit down and watch it. And I did. So it was from November 26th of 1987. Live attendance was 21,300. It was in Richfield Coliseum, where the Cavaliers used to play in Richfield, Ohio, which is outside of Cleveland. And there was a funny notice at one point where Jesse Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon are on commentary. Jesse says he can't believe that he has to spend Thanksgiving in Cleveland. And Gorilla says, you're not in Cleveland, you're in Richfield. And Jesse says, that's even worse. That's a suburb of Cleveland.
I laughed when I heard that, and I thought of you immediately. I'm glad that you brought it up, because I was definitely going to say something.
Being from Ohio, I'm from south of Cleveland, but I've been to Cleveland. And the farther you go out of Cleveland, the worse it kind of gets. Try going to Parma sometime. But it was only 4 matches. I'm getting down to the match list here. Yeah, 4 matches. Yep. They were all 5-on-5 Survivor Series matches, which later they would go to 4-on-4. The exception here is being the tag team match. It's 5 teams versus 5 teams. So it's 20 guys at the ring. And I'll talk about that match when we get there. But that match is probably the most ridiculous of the 4 to me. Yeah. So I'll go over the card. The opener, we have Bruce Beefcake, Jake Roberts, Jim Duggan, Randy Savage, and Ricky Steamboat with Miss Elizabeth. Defeating Dangerous Danny Davis, Harley Race, Hercules, the Honky Tonk Man, and Ron Bass with Bobby Heenan and Jimmy Hart. This was it took 24 minutes. This was the match that I liked the most on the show, because I think it had the best pacing, and I think it got the most creative with the booking. You had a double count out between Jim Duggan and Harley Race, who were feuding at the time. And at the very end, you've got Savage, Steamboat, and Roberts against Honky Tonk Man by himself. He, at some point, gets knocked out of the ring and just takes a walk, just leaves. And that fits his character. Jesse fantastically puts it over on commentary. It's the smart move. He's 3-on-1. He can't win against these guys. He could get injured. That's going to make him lose the title if he gets injured. He was the IC champ at the time, of course. And so the smart move here was just to take a powder. And I thought that fit his character. I thought that made the other 3 guys look strong and made all 3 of them potential contenders for the IC title coming up. And of course, all 3 men had their issues with the Honky Tonk Man over the years. So the first match, to me, was clearly the best and the one I liked the best.
Yeah, I could probably agree with that. I guess the first and the last to me are pretty even. I agree with you that it fits Honky's character to walk. Although I will say I couldn't help but think about the whole issue with Honky not wanting to lose the Intercontinental title to Macho Man down the road.
Yes.
Lead to Macho Man winning the tournament at WrestleMania 4. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he wasn't even going to take a pin when it was 3-on-1 here, it kind of got in my head, like, I wonder what the backstage politics were here. But nevertheless, I agree with you. This was pretty well paced. And as both Gorilla and Jesse said, Elizabeth looked really good here.
Yes.
I can't help it. I was a big fan of hers. But yeah, this was a pretty good match and, enjoyable to watch.
Mm-hmm. And then second match was a women's match, which I didn't know they had 10 women. I thought
the same thing. That's funny. I had the exact same thought. I was like, wow, there's 10 women, and I don't even know who some of these people are.
I know. I don't. So this match is 20 minutes. You had the fabulous Moolah working face, but the best part is she gets booed out of the building.
Yep.
Like when she's in there, she's getting booed, even though she's supposedly working face. So it's the fabulous Moolah and the Jumping Bomb Angels of Itsuki Yamazaki and Norio Tatino, which I'm sure I botched. Rockin' Robin, who is Jake Roberts' sister, and Velvet McIntyre. They defeated Dawn Marie, not ECW Dawn Marie. This is a different Dawn Marie. Donna Cristiano, the Glamour Girls of Leilani Kind, Judy Martin, and Sensational Sherry with Jimmy Hart. The Glamour Girls were the women's tag champs at the time. Yes, they had women's tag belts in '87, and Sherry was the world champ. And Sherry, I thought, looked fantastic here. I love the outfit she was in. It was like this one-piece number. She had a cape. She almost kind of looked like a cross between a vampire and like a circus act performer. But I thought she looked really good here. And this to me was better than I thought it was going to be. The women were fairly competent, especially when you kind of weeded out the weaker elements, which included Moolah. Moolah, I thought, was the worst person in this match because she was wrestling like a robot.
Yeah.
It was very paint by numbers. And considering the fact that I don't know her age at this point, I didn't look it up, but the fact she had been wrestling for more than 50 years, it was like, snapmare, leads to a chin lock, and then and it was just all paint by numbers. It was all like day one wrestling school. But when it got down to 3-on-3, which is McIntyre and the Jumping Bomb Angels versus the Glamour Girls and Sherry, that portion I thought was really good. I really enjoyed that portion. If you don't know the Jumping Bomb Angels, look them up, research them, watch some of their stuff. They were ahead of their time, and you could bring them to today and just tweak their moveset a little bit, just modernize them, and they could do it, and they would fit in fine with today's female wrestling scene. I'm pretty sure. But this was basically, after they weeded out the lesser women, was to set up the title matches, because McIntyre and the Angels win. McIntyre pinned Sherry. The Angels beat the Glamour Girls. So this is all about getting to those title matches for them. But this is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be the worst match of the night, and I wouldn't give it that moniker. Especially, the first part, like I said, gets better.
Yeah, no, I agree with almost everything you said there, and you took a lot of the words right out of my mouth. I mean, this started out, you have old awkward women running around, and like they clearly had to get them out of there quickly. And yeah, Moolah was, I guess intended to be the face here, but some of her move sets, like she still seemed to be working in the ring like a heel to me. So there was like this clash going on with her. But yeah, I mean, she was clearly, up in age at this point, and you have Sherry in there. And I'll be honest, I've not seen too much of Sherry's in-ring work as like a talent. But she was really good here as well. Once, as you said, some of the awkward talent got out of there, this became really, really good to me. The Jumping Bomb Angels were just really, really outstanding. I think that a tag match between them and the Glamour Girls could have been a match on an event. And obviously back at this time, there wasn't like a pay-per-view every month. So the idea of them being on a pay-per-view was probably far-fetched, but I think that those two teams worked well enough together. I mean, there was a body scissors at one point. I can't tell you the last time I saw that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this became really good at the end. And I just want to add one more thing. The segment before this match, which was interviewing Andre's team for the main event.
Yeah.
I made a note just about, even though Andre was, becoming in more pain and having health issues, just in this interview, Andre is, a very scary individual. Like just his face. Like you can't get past that. But yeah,
and there, of course, interviews with different teams, which I'm skipping. And there is at one point a vignette with the $1 Million Man that basically recaps all of his money challenges and him buying things and him like he's eating squab for Thanksgiving dinner because turkey is for the peasants. Fantastic. But I thought it was kind of odd that he wasn't included here.
Right.
But he was used. They give him a segment. So anyway, the next up we have the tag team match, and take a breath on this one. We have the British Bulldogs of Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid, the Killer Bees of B. Brian Blair and Jim Brunzell, the Fabulous Rougeaus of Jacques and Raymond. And I always forget that they started out as faces because they're terrible faces. Strike Force of Rick Martel and Tito Santana, and the Young Steins of Jim Powers and Paul Roma. They defeated the Bolsheviks of Boris Zukov and Nikolai Volkov, Demolition of Axe and Smash, the Dream Team of Dino Bravo and Greg Valentine, the Hart Foundation of Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, the Islanders of Haku and Tama, with Bobby Heenan, Mr. Fuji, Jimmy Hart, Johnny Valiant, and Slick. Every heel team had a manager, and they were all at ringside. And unique here, if your partner is pinned, you go too.
Right.
So if Zukov gets pinned, Volkov also goes. So that kind of, this match was still 37 minutes long, but I'm sure that helped. And what made me laugh so much, the early beginning of this is a complete cluster because you've got so many guys that the neutral corners are the only plain pieces of the ring. The rest of it, you have a person on every other piece of the apron. The ring's like 90% covered with people. So when you would throw somebody into the ropes, they would hit somebody.
Right.
Or they would be able to tag somebody, or you would body slam somebody, and they would just from the roll be in their own corner. And it was just ridiculous because at some point, I believe it was with Jim Brunzell, that Jesse was just going off of how completely stupid he was for not tagging people when he was so close to people to tag. So it was way too many people in the ring. And I was kind of surprised that this gets down to the Islanders versus the Young Stallions and the Killer Bees, because they were not your premier teams. My thoughts on that is that maybe they were trying to give a rub to some of these to these three lesser teams. Hey, let's see if we can build them up, make something out of them. At the same time, kind of what you talked about with, which I now that I say that, I don't remember exactly what you said, but the idea here that you can take a loss, that you can that you can have your world champions in Strikeforce take a loss because it doesn't mean anything and it helps to build up. And same thing with the women's match. Sherry can take the pin and it helps us set up the program with Velvet. You know? So same thing here. And once again, when we got down to the Islanders, who I thought looked great. I think the Islanders are very underrated against the Killer Bees and the Young Stallions. I thought that was a really good portion. I really enjoyed the end part. I didn't like the finish, which were the Bees doing their masked switch. Which is a heel move. You've got these it's a face team doing a heel mask switch, but they wind up getting the win, which is fine. I actually thought this was the worst match because of the way it was staged. Again, this is the first year of the event. It's an experiment. I don't think they thought it out. I'm guessing they didn't put everybody out there for a test run to see what it would look like. Because if they did, they probably would have changed it up somehow. You know what I think would have been cool would be one guy for each team. You flip a coin or they decide and it's one guy representing each team. So you would still have 5-on-5. I think that would have been a cool way to go, but we got what we got here.
Yeah, this was not done that often for the reasons that Leonard just laid out. And I mean, gosh, 37 minutes this match was, but God, it really does feel like a lot longer. It was somewhat of a chore to sit through, despite the fact that there's so many good people in this match. But the fact is, there's just too many people. And a couple of notes that I made was Bret the Hitman Hart's pin, which he would use well into becoming a main eventer. And I don't know, Leonard, if you can think of anybody else that does a pin like that, where he doesn't really hook the leg, but he lays on the one guy on the one arm and then holds down the other arm, obviously trying to make sure that the shoulders don't move.
Oh yeah.
And like he was really unique in that he did that. So it was funny to me. I noticed that when I was watching it. But
Yeah, I've never really thought about that. You are right. That is a pin that he would do, and I don't think that was a particular pin style. I don't remember anyone else ever doing. So
right.
I would be curious where he picked that up.
Yeah, I also put a note down about the referee's shirt, which this match went so long, and the referee had to be in so many places at once that his shirt was coming untucked towards the end, which I just thought was funny. But to me, the standout performance was the Young Stallions, and as you said about how kind of odd it was about the teams that were there at the end, and I think exactly what you said. I think that they were trying to give these teams a push, and it's interesting to see that, knowing that the fact that the Young Stallions would not really have a long run, as they would kind of go on their separate paths. But they clearly got a little bit of a rub here because they put on a good performance. I don't know what happened with them directly after this, but yeah, I thought that they were standouts.
Yeah. Then we get our main event, which is Andre the Giant, Butch Reed, King Kong Bundy, One Man Gang, and Rick Rude with Bobby Heenan Slick. They defeated the face team, which kind of surprised me, of Bam Bam Bigelow, Don Morocco, Hulk Hogan, Ken Patera, and Paul Orndorff with Oliver Humperdinck, who was Bigelow's manager. This one was, I don't know, it felt very much of the moment because it was all about Hogan versus the big bads. And Gorilla does mention that there was like 1 ton of humanity on the heel side. And when Rick Rude is the smallest dude, and he looks so small compared to these other guys, and he was a very muscular guy, but he looks so small compared to these other guys. And this is a perfect match for Andre because he can't do much and he doesn't have to. He just stands on the apron pretty much the entire match. Everyone else works around him. There's a lot of dead weight on the face team. I am not a big fan of, Patera. Morocco at this point was past his prime, put on a lot of weight. Face Orndorff doesn't work. And of course, this is all about Hogan getting most of the glory until he winds up getting eliminated by countout because he can get pinned. Although Hogan getting pinned by, say, Bundy or Gang would have wonderfully set up, a match, a future match between them. But the fact that you get Hogan out of there and it comes down to Bigelow, and then Bigelow gets the pins on Bundy and Gang, he then loses to Andre in very swift fashion because Andre can't do much, as I said. The suplex that he gives to Bigelow was scary because he barely got him off the ground.
Yeah, it was like a half suplex, if that.
Yeah, it was more like a double underhook toss.
Yeah.
It was more of a toss than a suplex. Gorilla called it a suplex. But then after Bigelow loses, that's a great win for Andre. Andre looks great, and that helps us set up the rematch from WrestleMania 3, which would happen with the main event in the following year in '88, which would lead to WrestleMania 4, etc. So, but then Hogan comes back out and gloats, even though Bigelow was the last man for his team. And I think we talked about this before when we rebooked WrestleMania 4, is that I felt they missed the boat on Bigelow. And that was probably because of Hogan not wanting someone to get up to his level of being a face main event. As a kid, I remember just being completely blown out of the water by Bam Bam Bigelow when I first saw him. I think this was a possible step to giving him that push. I don't think he necessarily needed to beat Andre, but I think he needed to stand tall at the end, not having Hogan come back to do that. So this to me was just the usual Hogan is God, just put in a different wrapper.
Yeah, I mean, this was very much the Hogan must pose era. Anybody listens to something
Yeah.
to wrestle with, he had to pose. So this was all about the Hogan Andre tease, and that's precisely what it was when regarding that. It was just a tease. I agree with you. I think, if Vince had to go back, I think he specifically would have done some different things with Hogan to make some of the build up and the drama surrounding the main events of the big pay-per-views mean more. So like if he would have gotten pinned here by Andre, or maybe Andre knocks him out of the ring and he gets counted out because he's just knocked out cold. Something, they could have done something different. But yeah, it was like, although I liked a lot of the action in the ring, the way it was done was a little odd. Although Bam Bam wasn't very much a standout. I thought he gave a great performance. Rick Rude gave also a really good performance because he was in there a lot before he got eliminated. And yeah, I mean, as a kid, the Hogan must pose thing was like delightful for me every time it happened. But yeah, in retrospect, you look at this and it would have been cool for Bam Bam to stand tall, And like you say, I don't know if it was more of the like, well, Hogan had to be out there to have the spotlight, or if it was just like, well, we got to reinforce that it's Hogan Andre, and so I kind of agree with you in that it's like of the moment, the way this match unravels. But a couple of other notes that I made about the in-between segments. Specifically, I forgot to mention this when we were talking about the tag team one, where there's so many guys in the interview segments that like they keep repeating the same like psych up actions. Like if you go back and you watch the people that aren't talking, they keep doing like the same things where they're like, yeah, like they keep, it's like watching a video game that's broken. Like, like they all don't know what to do. They're just standing around. The Rougeau brothers are like right next to Dynamite Kid, which if you know the history of that whole issue, to me, I found it funny. Yeah, so, and then the other segment, which was the Hulk Hogan's team, to me, I thought, they could put, if they wanted to put a PSA out about cocaine and steroids, that's what you would watch. You would watch segments like that because those guys are like so revved up and like off the walls that I thought to myself, like, I don't know what they were doing before this, but it probably wasn't, just slapping each other in the face before like a big fight or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing that we really didn't note about the Survivor Series is the fact that this was pretty much created to counteract Starrcade.
Yeah.
And like Vince, as anybody who listens to the major podcast knows, like he would threaten the cable outlets to not carry Starrcade, and if they did, then they wouldn't get WrestleMania 4, and a lot of them complied with him. So that's kind of why Survivor Series existed, but the crowd was still really, really hot for this event. Like Gorilla and Jesse, whose commentary is so good, they even said, especially during the main event, that they had trouble hearing each other. They said that a couple times just because the crowd was so into this, even though it was a new event. Like, though I forgot to mention at the beginning, they even laid out the rules with a graphic, which I don't know if they ever did that in subsequent years. Like, which I thought was funny. All the rules are pretty obvious, except for number 5, which I guarantee they never mentioned again, which was you can be eliminated via ref's decision due to injury. Like, which is obvious, I guess. But it's the fact that that was in a graphic to me was interesting because this was the first time that they tried this. So
that would be a great way to eliminate somebody, would be through referees stoppage or because of injury. I think that would be a great way to save face for someone and prove how tough somebody was.
Absolutely.
Now when you compare the Survivor Series 87, again, the first one ever, to a later one, say the next one we're going to talk about, that pay-per-view, the next one we're going to talk about is much slicker. The pace is much better in matches. The eliminations are quicker. I think the booking's more creative. Going 4-4 as opposed to 5-5 works better. Yeah. And that's me throwing it to you and your pick.
Right, absolutely. And the one that I wanted to talk about was Survivor Series 1990. And this event was the 4th annual Survivor Series event. It took place on Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd, 1990, at the Hartford Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut. And there's one major thing that this event is known for, which we'll get to. The attendance was around 16,000. And let's get to the card here, and we'll talk about some of the goings on as we go along. There was a dark match here, which was just odd considering the way the rest of the card was, with Shane Douglas against Buddy Rose. And Shane Douglas would win that match. So let's start with the first match. And but before we do, I'll just say one of the things that I liked about this event was the fact that the teams had names. Although this was the kind of the 80s Hogan, cartoony character era, I like the fact that the teams have names. It really, to me, helped on the commentary, because the commentators, Gorilla and Roddy Piper, which I'll comment on as we go, were able to refer to the teams by name instead of just referring to each individual, like captain's team, like this is Hacksaw's team, this is whoever's team, so I liked that part of it. So you have in the first match the Warriors, which consists of Animal, Hawk, the Texas Tornado, and the Ultimate Warrior, defeating the Perfect team of Axe, Crush, Smash of Demolition, and Mr. Perfect with Bobby Heenan and Mr. Fuji. This match would be 14 minutes and 20 seconds. And I thought that, back in the day, the whole comparison was between Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, and Demolition. Demolition was, in my opinion, falsely looked at as a Road Warriors ripoff. So when both teams were together in WWF, there was a lot of interaction between the two, but there wasn't really any satisfying blow off between these teams, which I thought was really dumb. And here you have them both teams, 5 guys DQ'd, which I thought was just so stupid. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again about the whole Road Warriors not being able to lose thing. You see it over and over again when you look back at their matches. And come on, why wouldn't I don't understand why. Okay, so they lose to Demolition in this match so that they can destroy Demolition later. I don't understand how that's a bad play, but hey, they did what they did. So yeah, this match was pretty good, though. It was what it was. I mean, it's the Ultimate Warrior, so I mean his matches aren't the best, but the Texas Tornado was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and Ultimate Warrior was WWF Champion. So you had both champions in the opening match, which is interesting when you think about it. Yeah, I mean this one was what it was. It wasn't my favorite match on this card, but I was entertained for the most part. Leonard, how about you?
I was surprised that it was the world champion and the IC champ in the opener, but since you got and we're going to talk about this at the end, but this is the year of the Ultimate Survivor, so the winners go on to a match at the end of the night. So the Warrior gets to come back. So I think that helps to, if he's opening and he's going to come back, then that's fine. The Warriors, I thought, was a great team name, because not only do you have the Ultimate Warrior and the Road Warriors, but Kerry Von Erich was once known as the Modern Day Warrior. So they're all warriors. So I thought that was a great name. I like the fact that you have all 3 members of Demolition on the team here with Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig. I know that Hennig and Warrior, I think, had some matches, but that wasn't a major program for him. I wish they would have done more with that. I think Perfect is one of those guys that we've talked about before. There's only a handful of people that can get good matches out of the old. Savage is one, Rude was one, and I think Perfect was another, and probably should have been given more of a main event run with him while he was champion. But yeah, I thought this was a fine match. I enjoyed it for what it was. I agreed with you that I didn't like the schmoz to get rid of the Warriors and Demolition. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. It kind of skirts the rules. To me, I think it would make more sense if you do a tit for tat thing. Animal beats Crush, Crush beats Animal, Hawk beats Crush, Mash beats the Hawk, whatever, and just have them take each other out and make it kind of even in that way to set up more with them. So I know that on the house show circuit, Von Erich would team with the Warriors against Demolition. But yeah, as you mentioned, it was all everyone wanted that big tag blow off between the two that we never really got. This was, as far as a major pay-per-view event, seeing them all in the ring together, this is it. So I think it's kind of historic from that standpoint. Like I said, I think it was a good opener. As again, on the first show, all those matches were over 20 minutes long. This is under 15 minutes. But I thought the pace was good because even after you had the double DQ and you're down to Von Erich and Warrior against Hennig, that's a nice sequence. I think that works well. So
yeah, and you had mentioned that we talked about the length of time of the matches. They clearly, since the first one, which we just talked about, the production values have gotten better, and the matches are more streamlined with 4-on-4. Clearly, one could argue, well, we need to get rid of those two tag teams, to kind of get the pace moving along a lot quicker, because this event is a lot shorter in total than the first one, which was about 2 hours, 44 minutes. I think this one's around 2:20 or so. But yeah, so they were clearly trying to move things along. The next match is the $1 Million team of the Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, Ted DiBiase, and a mystery opponent with Brother Love, Jimmy Hart, and Virgil, defeating the dream team of Bret Hart, Dusty Rhodes, Coco Beware, and Jim Neidhart. It's 13 minutes and 54 seconds, and this was a really good match. And the reason that everybody remembers it, and did I mention the other team was called the Dream Team? I forget if I mentioned that.
Yes. You named the $1 Million team versus the Dream Team. Yes.
Right. And so obviously the mystery opponent was The Undertaker. And I remember watching this live and was just kind of dumbfounded by what I was looking at, because this was obviously, it's all been said over and over again, but this is a character which we didn't see anything like that before. And you can see the expressions of the people in the crowd when he walks down, and the eerie funeral music, and it was just what a debut. And he gets in there and he gets rid of Coco Beware, which is one thing, but then he gets rid of Dusty Rhodes, which was a pretty big deal in the world of wrestling. So but eventually he gets counted out, so he makes an impact, but he doesn't lose right away either, to kind of get some of that new shine off of him. He's still kind of a shocking thing. So this was a tremendous match. Ted DiBiase looked really good here, and there was an extended segment here with DiBiase and Bret Hart, which to me was great stuff to watch. So this one is probably the one that stood out to me the most. But before Leonard, you give your thoughts. We didn't really talk. You mentioned the grand finale match, which, I guess we could give more thoughts on that later. But the whole idea here was all the survivors get to move on to the grand finale match, and we'll give our thoughts on that particular concept when we get there. But what are your thoughts on this second match?
Well, as you said, the main thing people remember about the show is the debut of The Undertaker. And I have to compliment the way that he's presented here. The way he's shot when he comes out is from the bottom looking up and tilted. So he not only looks huge, but he looks weird. He looks a little bit off. They have great close-ups, and these close-ups are in Taker packages to this day when they do those. Yeah. Like when he removes his hat for the first time, when he's choking Bret Hart out in the corner. They just had that figured out, how they were going to present him, and that was great. The thing that I think hurts him is Roddy Piper on commentary is treating him like a joke.
I totally agree. We haven't talked about the commentary yet, but I totally 100% agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. He treated. Piper as a commentator treated everything as a joke. Nothing was serious. He was just blathering on, and the fact that he gives The Undertaker nothing. If he would have compared that to, say, Jesse Ventura, Ventura would have just been over the top on how menacing he was, how big he was, how quick he was for his size. They would have got him over.
Yep.
Piper's just doing funeral and zombie jokes. That's all he's doing, and it hurts. I don't like that he gets himself eliminated by helping Brother Love, who is his manager, so that kind of makes sense, but it feels a little weak to me. Given that this is the year of the Ultimate Survivors, I would have had him and Dibiase win and survive and go on to the end, and then you could have had him do the Brother Love bit or something like that. I think it just helps to get him over more if he survives the initial match, considering that he can move on to a secondary match, and then you can do that to kind of get him out of there without necessarily getting pinned or submitted.
Yeah, no, I think that would have been cool. I didn't even think about that, but that would have been a cool thing. Just to kind of double down on the commentary. I remember when because I remember this event really fondly because there's a really great thing that happens in the debut of The Undertaker. And then there's like one of the worst moments ever, which we'll get to that when it happens.
Yeah.
But I remember when I started watching it again, I was like, I'd forgotten that Roddy Piper was on commentary. And like, I want to say to a degree, I got used to it as it went along. But yeah, I totally agree. He really does, tarnish the debut there. And because whoever the cameraman was, those kind of swooping angles when they enter, even like Hogan's entrance later on, like they still show those clips of these guys entering. So my hats off to whoever made that choice. But yeah, Piper's commentary, there were parts about it that I liked in that it stayed true to his character, which, for instance, anytime Hogan was mentioned, like Piper would get his digs in on Hogan because they weren't best friends by any stretch. So it was interesting to me that Piper was a face here, a good guy, but he was still telling the truth in how he felt about some of the people he had faced in the past. So let's move on to our next match, which to me are the best team names.
Yeah, I love these.
We have the Visionaries of Hercules, Paul Roma, Rick Martel, and the Warlord with Slick defeating the Vipers of Jake Roberts, Jimmy Snuka, Marty Jannetty, and Shawn Michaels, the Rockers. This match is the longest on the card of 17 minutes and 42 seconds. This was a really good match as well. The main part of it was to further the Jake Roberts model Rick Martel storyline, which they did really, really well, I thought. And the whole thing at the end was the fact that the entire Visionaries team moved on to the grand finale. So, you have Paul Roma, who has been both of the events, and I'm a Paul Roma mark.
Yes.
So, he moves on to the grand finale. So yeah, I mean, this was the commentary spent a lot of time talking about Jake's eye, and it's I don't know. I'm still a sucker for that whole storyline in the blindfold match. It's so silly, but as a kid, I only have fond memories of this storyline and the whole arrogance thing. But Leonard, what'd you think of this one?
Well, as you said, the team names here are great because the Visionaries play on the fact that Jake, at this point in storyline, could only see out of one eye.
Right.
And I like later how when they're doing the build-up for the main event that Martel puts over, we had a vision about this. We had a vision that I believe, I don't know, do you know this? Are they the only whole team to survive? I would guess not. That some other whole team.
Yeah, I want to say probably that happened before, but or happened again, I should say. But
yeah, it's happened again. This was the first time it happened, and I thought that was some different booking. I thought that was some gutsy booking to have them all win and advance. One thing that is interesting to note here. So in the last match, even though Dusty Rhodes was the captain, your biggest name, Bret Hart's your last guy on that team. Here, Jake Roberts is the last guy on the team, but the next to last guy is Shawn Michaels, even though Snook is the bigger name. So I think what's very interesting about these early Survivor Series matches is I know there's a thing that I believe I heard Jim Ross say that sometimes you just put that dog in there to see if it hunts. And I think that's one thing they felt they could do with Survivor Series. Let's let Shawn Michaels have a little extra time in the ring, see what he can do. Let's give Brett a little extra time in the ring, see what he can do.
Yeah.
So I think you get that a little bit here with this. I really like the way that this kind of played out because, again, it was different. We never saw a whole team survive before. So the way that they kind of built that up and it came across, I think worked pretty well. Now, would I have chosen Power and Glory and the Warlord to advance to the end of the night? Probably not. But the way that they constructed it, I think works here. So, I
in
just like.
retrospect, it would have been better if, like, instead of the Warlord, the Undertaker advanced.
Right. I don't know if you move the Undertaker to this team or you have the Warlord get eliminated. But either or, I like the booking of it because it was different.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention in this match as well, like, although I'm, I don't really like talking about him, similar to the way I would talk about Benoit, but Snuka looked incredibly jacked here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what he was doing. I'm not going to speculate, but like he was incredibly ripped here in this match, sporting the goatee and everything. So
he looked jacked until like a few years before he died.
Yeah.
I remember seeing him, I think it was an indie show, maybe in the late 90s, and he's still jacked.
Yep. So let's move on to the next match, which is the aptly named the Hulkamaniacs of Big Boss Man, Hulk Hogan, Jim Duggan, and Tugboat defeating the natural disasters of the Barbarian, Dino Bravo, Earthquake, and Haku with Bobby Heenan and Jimmy Hart. This match was 14 minutes and 49 seconds. And no real surprise on what happens here. The big feud with this was Hulk Hogan and the Earthquake. But a lot of names in this. And one of the notes that I made about this, because the match, plays out the way a Hulk Hogan match would in this era, but Hulk Hogan was still the main attraction here. And you look at the fact that now, as we mentioned, the Ultimate Warrior would come back in the grand finale and get his moments, but Hogan is still the main attraction. You have the Warrior opening the event, and he has his fans. You can hear them cheer in this, but it's kind of clear to me where the focus still lies. But yeah, I mean, this match was fine for what it was. If people have grown tired of Hogan and some of the routines of his matches, and they probably didn't like it very much. But I thought it was fine. He was the one that moved on to the grand finale, obviously. So, Leonard, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the main event from '87. It's Hogan being Hogan. He's got a team of big beefy dudes. They're up against a team of big beefy dudes.
That should have been one of the names, right?
The beefy dudes. Yeah. Snap into it. But when this started, I knew, well, Hogan's gonna, without looking ahead and without remembering, I was like, well, Hogan's definitely gonna move ahead. So yeah, there's not a whole lot I think I can say about this more other than the fact that I think it was predictable. And again, you've got Hogan looking like a beast going over again. Haku's the smallest guy on the heel team. And Hogan pretty much mows over everybody else. So it was a means to an end.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, when you talk about Haku being the smallest guy, because I mean, if you look at, I mean, I don't know much about the Barbarian outside of wrestling, but I mean, Dino Bravo was like, an incredible strong man. Earthquake was a sumo wrestler, and Haku has obviously legendarily been known as the toughest guy in wrestling. So
yeah, well, but Barbarian was kind of known for being a badass too, and he is, I forget what his nationality is, but he's somehow connected to that island heritage.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it is. And the Barbarian is still built. I don't know if you remember the story that we saw him a couple years ago. at a show and talk to him. And a good friend of the show, Dan Weber, got to chop the Barbarian.
Oh, that's
And
right. Yeah.
And when we were driving home, Dan's hand was still shaking because he is still solid, you know, and I don't know how old he is, but at that age, still just solid. Here too, I forgot to mention, I don't like a couple of the eliminations. Tugboat Earthquake brawl to a double count out. Considering that they would become a tag team at some point, I thought that was a little interesting. Duggan loses by disqualification, so I think you have a couple of weak eliminations, but again, it kind of helps to grease the wheels to get to where you're going.
Right. Well, our next match, we have the alliance of Butch and Luke of the Bushwhackers, Nikolai Volkov, and Tito Santana defeating the mercenaries of Boris Zukov, Sergeant Slaughter, Sato and Tanaka, the Orient Express, with Mr. Fuji and General Adnan. This match is 10 minutes and 52 seconds. And surprisingly, Tito is the one that moves on here, and we're a big fan of Tito here on this show.
Yes.
And so I thought it was great that he moved on because, you know, they wanted to give somebody else, you know, to the faces in the grand finale. So I thought it was cool that it was Tito. But the accomplishment in this match, despite the fact that Tito was the survivor, was Slaughter. And as we know what happens after this, Slaughter becomes the WWF champion at the Royal Rumble. So they wanted to make Sergeant Slaughter look strong, and they did that because he pretty much destroyed the entire team except for Tito, and even destroyed Tito because he got disqualified. That's how they had Slaughter walk away from this looking like such a, you know, heel badass, because General Adnan comes in and hits Tito with the flag. So yeah, I mean, this match to me wasn't altogether good if in terms of technical wrestling, but there were so many characters in it that I found interesting and fun to watch. And so, you know, you have Slaughter's face painted with camo and just, you know, he was even, you know, Slaughter looked old even here, but he, you know, he could still go in the ring. So yeah, this match was fine. Glad to see Tito move on, but the goal was to get Slaughter to the main event status. So
yeah, again, I like the booking here. You know, Tito advances and he does get 2 pins. He eliminates Zukov and Tanaka here. And that's in quick order because I'm looking at the list here. And Slaughter's by himself at 2 minutes and 13 seconds. And he's 4-on-1, and he eliminates between 5:25 and 6:53 of the match. He gets rid of the Bushwhackers and Volkov.
right.
And again, the booking of that I thought was really creative. I really, you know, like that. If your end goal is we don't want Slaughter to move on, but we want Slaughter to look badass and position him for that main event match with the Warrior at the Rumble. This, I think, was a good way to do it because, as you said too, even though he loses by disqualification because General Adnan blatantly attacks Tito Santana. So I did think it was interesting that Tito was the one who advances here. Of course, as you said, we love Tito, so I was happy to see him being the one to advance. And again, as you said, it's not a great match, but the way they laid it out and the booking of it, I thought was creative. I liked how they did that. And before we move on to the main event, which is the Survivors, because you mentioned this, they have to give somebody else to the face team. The fact that it's 3-on-5 to me doesn't make any sense. And the whole night long, Gorilla, after the Visionaries win, Gorilla Monsoon on commentary keeps talking about, well, Warrior's by himself. He's 5-on-1. He's all by himself. It's like, well, why? Because you never, if you said at the top of the show, okay, here's column A and here's column B. And if column A survives, they move to team A1. If column B survives, they move to team B2 or whatever. But you didn't explain that. It was just, oh, the faces are on this side and the heels are on the other, when they consciously didn't at that time recognize the idea of baby faces and heels. They didn't talk about that. So to me, it would have made sense if you would have had the Visionaries, because they survived as a team. Okay, cool, you advance, and you put Dibiase with Hogan, Warrior, and Tito Santana. And I just think that would be a funny dynamic. I think it would be a unique dynamic. And the fact that, like, and I would really love to see the beginning of the match, like Dibiase's in there and is getting his butt kicked, and like they won't tag. Like he goes for a tag and they won't tag, and he just gets beat. I think that would have been hilarious. I think that would have been a good way to do it. But before we talk about that actual match, your thought on the idea that's 3 against 5 and how that just doesn't make sense. At least it doesn't to me.
Well, I mean, I think the logic that they were going with was the fact that the faces needed to kind of come from behind. They needed to overcome this monumental task of defeating 5 guys. And they wanted to, I guess my thoughts are that they wanted the fans to think that there's no way that these 3 guys can beat 5 other guys. There's just no way. What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, they actually did it. So I agree with you, like, in that, you know, they could have done other things. And so one of the reasons I like this event the most is because of the grand finale match. I think that this concept had so much potential. And I think, based on what Leonard said, there were some kinks that could have been worked out because, you know, they didn't really say, like, it was just kind of understood, well, these are the bad guys. They're going to be on the bad guy team. And these are the good guys. Like, they didn't spell it out, but they could have messed with this, you know, and made it better. And I know the Bruce Pritchard's talked about it on his podcast before, and, you know, they just not something they went back to. I really wish that they would have, because I think, like you said, if they had like put all the names in a hat and whoever came out, it was going to be even teams, as much as that is possible. And then there would be one sole survivor. You know, I think that would have been interesting. But you know, they didn't really do it a lot. So this is what you got. But I thought it was a cool idea. And let's just lay out, in case anybody isn't paying attention, who's in it. We have Hogan, Tito Santana, and the Ultimate Warrior defeating Hercules, Paul Roma, Rick Martel, Ted DiBiase, and the Warlord in 9 minutes and 7 seconds. And yeah, I mean, it's to me very much the Hogan show here. And Hogan tags Warrior in at the last minute, and Warrior gets the pin because he's the champion. But you know, Hogan was getting, like, as they say, getting his stuff in, like, so, you know, but he gave the Warrior the pin. So, like, he, you know, it's like, here you go, you can do the, you know, but yeah, I mean, I really dig this concept, and I agree it wasn't, you know, blemish free here, but I really do wish they would have kept it to some degree. And just to kind of comment on the whole concept of the Survivor Series as it relates to what they're doing now, like, after this in 91, they would have like a world title match. It would be Hogan and the Undertaker,
the greatest challenge,
right? And so, and little by little, as the years went on, they got away from having just nothing but elimination matches. And on one hand, I understand why, but on the other hand, now it's just a pay-per-view. And like, it might still be considered one of the big 4, but to me, it's really not anymore. Like, to me, this is just a pay-per-view. Now, they do the whole brand versus brand thing. I've yet to meet somebody that really cares who wins between Raw or SmackDown. Maybe there are people out there that do. But I wish they would have stuck with the simple 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 concepts, because in the events that we've covered, and in between those, the ones we haven't covered from 87 to 90, the crowd is into this concept. They like this idea, and they're cheering and they're rooting for the teams and who their favorites are. And like, the crowd is behind this idea. So I think they could have stuck with it. You know, that's me, because this was an event I really liked in the past. And now I kind of watch it because still in the back of my head, I think, well, this is one of the big 4. So, but it never turns out to earn that descriptor, in my opinion. So, Leonard, what do you think?
Well, first of all, with the Ultimate Survivors match, my idea is that probably the reason they did that was so you could have Hogan and Warrior both standing tall at the end of the night. You got your 2 biggest draws together at the end of the night, but you don't want them on the same team to start with. You know, you spread them out and then bring them together. And I was surprised that Rick Martel got eliminated by count out. We have to protect Rick Martel by count
Yeah.
out. I don't quite get that.
Yeah, that was odd. Like I mean, like they try to move these matches along, but then the way they have people eliminated, sometimes it makes sense, and other times it just doesn't.
Yeah, count out didn't to me. I think if Tito and Martel would have brawled out, and that's a double count out, that makes sense, kind of. And what I thought was interesting was they were hyping that like in 2 days they were doing a Saturday night's main event, or no, it was a main event. It was the main event.
Right.
It was one of those, which I think was on Friday, which was the very next night, which I didn't know. And the main event of that was going to be the Ultimate Warrior versus Ted Dibiase. So they mentioned that a little bit, but it probably would have made sense if Dibiase takes the count if he's going to face the Warrior the next night, you know? But I thought it was interesting because they do a pay-per-view, and then the very next night they're doing a big free TV event. And that's interesting because the following year, 91, which you mentioned, they would do Survivor Series on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and then on Tuesday have this Tuesday in Texas.
Right.
So it's like they were kind of experimenting with the idea of how close can we do big events
It's like
and continue to draw.
It's like kind of batshit crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, about doing stuff that close and telling a story that's gonna now tune in 2 days from now to see the end of it.
So yeah, the one thing we didn't mention, which I alluded to earlier, the fact the Undertaker debuted was one of the best things, and one of the worst things was the egg hatching, and that occurred towards the end of the event.
Yes,
and
I believe that was the segment between the alliance versus the mercenaries and the Ultimate Survivor. So
the
they
grand
could put
finale,
a
right? Because they needed
now,
to have some rest.
Before we get to that, I would like to mention there's another significant segment. I mentioned how Ted DiBiase wasn't on a team in '87, and they did a vignette with him. Randy Savage was not on a team here, and they do an interview with him on the stage. He's the Macho King at this point, and it's basically him calling out the Ultimate Warrior and wanting a title match and saying he's going to claim his belt back. So there's not a whole lot there, but I found it was interesting that Savage wasn't on a team, I should say, but they still used him. They gave him time.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that because I loved his outfit. How many people could sport red and white stripes like that? I mean, gosh, back when he had robes, I wasn't really big on the Macho Man with robes, but the outfits he had when he was the Macho King are like spectacular to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were really building the Warrior Macho King storyline here, and would continue to do so. But the big segment, and we had seen for weeks the build up to the egg, what was going to come out of the egg, and I think it was rumored that it could have possibly, people created rumors that it could have possibly been a talent, like Flair or something. Pritchard has denied that was ever the case. It was the gobbledygooker. That was what they wanted to have come out, and that's what came out. And you can hear, initially anyway, all very clear boos from the crowd. And for those who might not know, it's Hector Guerrero in that suit, doing some of the flips and what have you in the ring with Mean Gene. This segment's obviously terrible. At the time, I remember just being like, this is silly. As a kid, it's like you don't really recognize this as shit, but maybe I did subconsciously, who knows. But yeah, it just was kind of a fart in church, this segment. I guess the crowd was somewhat getting into it. Maybe they were into Mean Gene doing stuff more than the gobbledygooker. I don't know. But yeah, so this is a segment that is just kind of reviled this day and age. But Leonard, do you have a fondness for the gobbledygooker?
Even as a kid, I didn't watch the show live. I saw, the segments on the syndicated programming that weekend. And when I saw the Gooker, my idea, I remember as a kid thinking, well, what is that? Like, what are they going to like? Is he a wrestler? Is he going to wrestle? I mean, Hector Guerrero is a great wrestler.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy to put in that suit because of what he can do, even within a suit like that. But he can't wrestle. I mean, I don't know if Bruce Pritchard had ever talked about it or anyone else on their podcast about what the idea for the Gooker was. I mean, the only thing I could see him being as a time killer is that he would come out and maybe play with the kids and dance with the kids and kill time when you needed to kill time.
Right.
But he couldn't wrestle like that. But it's very interesting the fact that at this event you have giant animated anamorphic turkey man dancing around, and you have undead zombie man.
Yeah.
Two ideas that on paper are batshit insane and don't look good. And one is the worst idea ever, and the other is the greatest idea ever.
Yeah. I mean, you also have a captain of a tugboat. And
yes,
it's just,
this was the height of the cartoony gimmicks, definitely.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
And you mentioned it after a little bit. I think the crowd doesn't necessarily hate it; they just don't care for it. They don't care about it,
right?
Because there wasn't a lot of noise going on. You hear Monsoon and Piper trying to push it. Oh, the kids love it. Blah blah blah. They're not. They're not loving it. So I do like the fact that they've embraced the Gooker in years since as a joke. Like, he was in the gimmick Battle Royal and he pops up every now and again. Yeah. And they've embraced it as being, okay, this is bad. And we embrace that badness when they want to. And the fact that WrestleCrap used the name, the Gooker Awards, for their worst of the years, should tell you something. But this, we mentioned the pay-per-view is mostly known for the debut of The Undertaker, but its second most known thing is the Gobbledygooker. It's become kind of a legend. So bad that it's infamous. And again, the only thing that I say to it is, what was the plan? Which I would guess is out there somewhere. Because was it a one-off? Was it to be a filler? Again, Hector can't wrestle in that suit. That would just look stupid. I don't know. But it was interesting. And yeah, I had heard all the rumors seem to have been like afterwards, like people saying, oh, it could have been Taker coming out of the egg, or it could have been a new talent or a new manager or something.
The Undertaker thought that was meant for him. We haven't talked about this. It's on his documentary.
Okay, I hadn't seen that, so talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's all. Like, in the documentary, like, he talks about how he was scared to death that he was going to be Eggman, like that he was going to have to come out of this egg, and obviously that didn't come to pass. Mm-hmm. But because both of those things happened at the same time, he had that fear, which is funny because, if he had been Eggman, we wouldn't be talking about him today, would we? Yeah,
I was gonna ask, how would that affect his career? And I think, one, they wouldn't show his debut. If he would have still went on the trajectory they did, they would never show his debut. They wouldn't show him coming out of the egg. They wouldn't do that at all.
Kind of like his name initially being Kane the Undertaker. They don't. Yes. They don't. You'll hear people mention that every once in a blue moon, but they really don't hammer that home. I think it was in his documentary series, but that's about it. Other than that, they really don't talk about that.
Yeah, and the fact too that he moves on very quickly from Brother Love as his manager to Paul Bearer, and that gets mentioned, and that's probably because Bruce Pritchard is still working with the WWF and always had a decent relationship with them. Right. That it was mentioned, he was the manager from day one, and that he was Ted DiBiase was the benefactor and brought the Undertaker in, bought the Undertaker and brought him in. And of course, they don't talk much about the Undertaker versus Undertaker match from SummerSlam because of that. Although I will mention, in that long-term booking fed that I'm doing, I've got Hulk Hogan is feuding with Andy Kaufman, and since I can't get the Undertaker, Andy Kaufman has hired the Underfaker to fight Hulk Hogan. And Kaufman always slips up on commentary and on a promo and calls him the Underfaker instead of the Undertaker.
That's outstanding. I like that. I don't know if we have the Underfaker in our Fever Dreams list off the top of my head. He might be there. Mm-hmm. Check.
I think he is, but
anywho, let us know what you think about these two Survivor Series pay-per-views and what your favorite is. And to be honest with you, I mean, I remember the other Survivor Series pay-per-views. I didn't really go back and look at each one to see, oh man, what was the best card from top to bottom. Like, this was the one that I thought of immediately because of the grand finale match and just the team names and all that. I just thought was really cool. I remember the Gang Rules one, and I remember the Deadly Game one, famously, where The Rock turned heel against Mick Foley at the end. It's also where Dwayne Gill came back into the tournament. But so I remember some of the other Survivor Series pay-per-views, and like, they have their good moments and bad moments, but I'm partial to the elimination style match, and that being the centerpiece. So let us know what your favorites are, and please comment and like this video, subscribe to our channel, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And for Leonard, my name is Chad. I hope you had a great holiday, and Alexa will see you out.